Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The Sethrak hit Sector 7 at 0300 local. No warning, no preliminary bombardment. Just a sudden wall of scaled bodies pouring through the gap between Firebase Kessler and the ridgeline. Hundreds of them. Fast. Organized. Their jaw clicks rattling through the dark like stones grinding together. General Don S. Davis stood in the command pit of Firebase Kessler with his hands flat on the tactical display and watched the red flood come. "Contact on the northern perimeter," Lieutenant Harsh called. 200 plus, moving in column formation, spreading at the tree line. Southern approach? Quiet. It won't stay quiet. Get second platoon on the south wall, now. Harsh relayed. Davis watched the display, tracking the red signatures as they fanned out across the terrain. The Sethrak moved like water finding cracks. Methodical, every squad covering the next. No gaps, no wasted movement. He'd fought them enough to know the pattern. The northern push was real, but it was also bait. Draw defenders to the noise. Then the southern column hits the weak side. Mortars on the northern tree line, fire for effect. The first rounds left the tubes with a hollow thump that vibrated through the firebase floor. Davis counted seconds. The detonations lit the perimeter in strobing white. Through the cameras, he saw Sethrak bodies scatter. Some went down. Others kept moving, their dense scaled hides absorbing shrapnel that would have shredded a man. Northern column stalling. They're reforming at 60 meters. Let them reform. Watch south. 11 seconds later, Harsh's voice changed. Southern contact. 150 plus. Fast movers. Davis didn't react. He'd already given the order. Second platoon opened up from the south wall, and the night turned into noise. Tracers stitched bright lines across the dark. The Sethrak southern column hit the kill zone at a sprint, their digitigrade legs driving them forward in bursts that covered ground faster than any human could match. But the kill zone was the kill zone. The first rank went down hard. The second rank trampled over them without pause. The third rank hit the wire. Claymores. The detonation line ripped across the southern approach. Steel balls tore through the Sethrak at waist height. Tails severed, limbs separated. The ones still standing stumbled forward on momentum alone, blind and shredded, their throat sacs inflating in distress calls that sounded like wet leather tearing. Northern column pushing again. Overlapping fire from towers 3 and 4. Don't let them close to 40 meters. The battle compressed into the ugly arithmetic that Davis knew better than his own name. Ammunition expenditure against casualty rate. Barrel heat against sustained fire requirements. How many Sethrak per minute versus how many rounds per minute? The math always came down to the same question. Do we run out of bullets before they run out of bodies? Tonight the answer was no. It took 47 minutes. When the last Sethrak fell back beyond the perimeter sensors, Davis had lost 9 men dead and 23 wounded. The Sethrak left 112 bodies in the wire and the kill zones. More in the tree line where the mortars had done their work. Davis stepped out of the command pit and walked the perimeter. He did this after every engagement. The men needed to see him standing, not talking, just present. The wounded were being loaded onto evac carriers, stretchers moving in steady lines toward the medical station. Some men walked on their own, holding pressure on wounds that steamed in the cold air. Others were carried. A few were quiet in the way that meant the medics were working against time. Davis watched the carriers lift off, heading for the field hospital at Outpost Rena, 60 kilometers east. From there, the critical cases would be transferred to orbital transport, and then to Satori 4. Satori 4, the healing world, green skies and temperate valleys filled with the most advanced medical infrastructure humanity had ever built. recovery wards that could rebuild a shattered Marine and put him back on the line in weeks instead of months. That was the cycle. Fight. Get hit. Get fixed. Fight again. Humanity's edge wasn't that its soldiers were stronger or faster than the Sethrak. They weren't. The edge was that humans came back. Wounded Marines returned to their units with scar tissue and experience. The Sethrak killed a man once. Humanity rebuilt him and sent him to kill Sethrak twice. Davis was walking back to the command pit when the priority channel screamed in his earpiece. He stopped, listened. Then he held still for a beat. "General." Harsh appeared at his side. "Sir, you're needed in comms." Davis followed him without speaking. The command pit was half empty now, the post-battle cycle running on autopilot. Davis walked to the secure terminal and entered his authentication. The message played. Fleet Admiral Corrin, recorded 6 hours ago, relayed through 3 comm buoys to reach Sector 7. Satori 4 had been bombarded. Orbital strike. 12 Sethrak capital ships had entered the system, bypassed the minimal defense picket, and put sustained plasma bombardment onto the surface for 90 minutes. Every major facility destroyed. Every settlement flattened. The hospital complexes, the rehabilitation centers, the surgical wards, the long-term recovery stations. All of it. Casualty estimate. Total. No evacuation had been possible. 14,000 medical personnel. 22,000 patients in various stages of recovery. Gone. Davis played the message twice. Not because he missed anything, because the second time he wasn't listening to the words. He was listening for what wasn't said. Corrin called it an atrocity, used words like unprecedented and violation of engagement norms. But Corrin was a fleet admiral. He thought in terms of treaties and conventions. Davis was a ground commander. He thought in terms of doctrine. He pulled up the tactical map, widened the scope from Sector 7 to theater-wide, looked at the Sethrak patterns over the last 6 months, the raids on medical convoys in Sector 3, the targeted strikes on field hospitals during the Varant campaign, the ambush on the hospital ship Meridian near the Calax transit point. 1 incident was an opportunity. 2 was a pattern. 6 was a doctrine. The reports had been there the whole time. No one had lined them up like this. The Sethrak weren't committing atrocities. They were executing a strategy. Clean, logical, perfectly consistent with how they thought. Wounded humans go to hospitals. Hospitals rebuild wounded humans. Rebuilt humans return to combat. Therefore, destroy hospitals. Destroy the wounded. Remove the entire recovery cycle from the equation. The arithmetic was elegant. Davis hated that he understood it. Harsh. "Sir, get me a secure line to Research Station Callaway. Dr. Anton O'Neill. Priority black." Harsh didn't ask why. He moved. 4 minutes later, the connection was live. O'Neill's face appeared on the screen, thin and angular, the kind of face that hadn't seen daylight in months. Behind him, the sterile white of a laboratory. "General Davis, I assume this isn't social. Satori 4 is gone." O'Neill went quiet. His eyes moved like he was calculating something, not grief. Processing. All of it? All of it. 14,000 staff, 22,000 patients, orbital bombardment, 90 minutes. O'Neill sat down slowly. The recovery pipeline. Dead. Every wounded Marine we evac from this point forward has nowhere to go. Field hospitals can stabilize. They cannot rebuild a soldier. Satori 4 was where the materials and the water's regenerative properties put him back on his feet in weeks. Without it, every casualty is permanent. What do you need from me, General? We don't have time to wait for a new strategy. By the time command adapts, we're already out of experienced soldiers. Davis let the silence hold for 3 seconds. I need the Compound 11. O'Neill's face changed. Not surprise. Something closer to recognition. Like he'd been waiting for this call without knowing it. It's not ready. I know. Animal testing only. The results were functional, but the cost was extreme. Organ failure within hours under sustained stress. Neural pathway degradation. Cardiac arrest under continued exertion. Every test subject that performed beyond normal physical limits died. Did they perform? O'Neill paused. Yes. Pain response was fully suppressed. Adrenal output tripled. The subjects continued operating through injuries that should have rendered them immobile. Broken bones, internal hemorrhaging, tissue damage that the brain simply stopped registering. They fought until systemic organ failure. How long? Under combat stress, 6 to 8 hours, maybe 10 in a subject with exceptional baseline conditioning. After that, the body shuts down. Cascade failure. Kidneys first, then liver, then cardiac. But for those first hours? For up to 6 hours, you'd have a soldier who doesn't feel pain, doesn't stop, and doesn't recognize physical limitation. After that, they start feeling pain, but the body is still flooded with adrenaline, so they keep fighting. They'd fight through wounds that would drop any normal human. But General, they would die. Every single one. I understand the cost. Do you? Because I need you to understand that this isn't medicine. It's a weapon, and the people you use it on are the ammunition. Davis went quiet. When he spoke, his voice was lower. I've sent men to die before. Never like this. He paused. I'll ask for volunteers, not a sign. If nobody stands up, I find another way. But I need the option, Doctor, because the Sethrak won't stop until we have nothing left. O'Neill held his gaze for a long time. Then he nodded once. I'll prepare the compound. How many doses? Start with 5. Delivery method is injection, intramuscular. Effects begin within 90 seconds. Once it's in, there's no reversal. No antidote. The process is terminal from the moment of injection. Understood. How fast can you get it to Sector 7? 12 hours by fast courier. Do it. The connection closed. Davis stood alone in the command pit. The tactical display still glowed with the aftermath of tonight's battle. The wounded were already at Outpost Rena, being stabilized, being prepped for transport to a healing world that no longer existed. He killed the display. Then he walked to the barracks where the Marines of 3rd Company were cleaning weapons, patching gear, and sitting in the heavy silence that follows combat. He didn't call formation, didn't raise his voice. He stood at the entrance and waited until they noticed him. Satori 4 was destroyed 6 hours ago. Orbital bombardment. No survivors. The silence changed. It went from tired to something else. Something with edges. The Sethrak doctrine is clear. They're eliminating our wounded. Every Marine who goes down is a permanent subtraction. They think removing our hospitals wins them the war. We're going to prove them wrong. Davis paused. Let them sit with it. I need 5 volunteers for a mission to retake Satori 4. The mission involves an experimental compound that will keep you fighting past normal human limits. The compound is not approved. It has not been tested on humans. It will kill you, not might. Will. The only question is what you do in the hours before it does. No speech. No appeal to honor, or duty, or revenge. Just the facts laid out like ammunition on a table. Duval stood first. He'd been sitting on an ammo crate, cleaning his rifle. He set the rifle down, stood up, and looked at Davis. Nothing in his face needed words. He'd already seen the Satori 4 casualty list. 2 of his original squad had been recovering there. He'd known before Davis said a word. Hargrove was second. He rose from where he'd been leaning against the wall, his compact shotgun across his knees. His younger brother had been a medic on Satori 4. Nobody in the room knew that except Duval, who'd seen Hargrove's face when the first rumors came through. Hargrove didn't look at anyone. He just stood. Stavros was third. The big man had been checking belt links for his crew-served weapon. He stopped, looked at his hands. He'd spent 6 weeks on Satori 4 8 months ago, getting his shoulder rebuilt. He knew the hallways, the staff, the sound of the recovery ward at night. He nodded once and stood. Welk was fourth. He was already standing because Welk was always moving. He looked at Davis. "You need a demo man. I'm the demo man." Davis nodded. Brannick was last. He'd been sitting apart from the others, still, patient, the way he always was. He'd had his knee rebuilt on Satori 4 3 months ago, walked those corridors, knew the layout of every building, every connecting tunnel, every ward. He stood up slow, favoring the knee out of habit even though it was fully healed. He said nothing. 5 Marines, standing. Davis looked at each one. He didn't thank them, didn't tell them they were brave. That wasn't what this was. Compound arrives in 12 hours. Mission briefing at 6 o'clock. Get rest. He turned and walked out. Behind him, Duval looked at the other 4. Hargrove, Stavros, Welk, Brannick. 4 men he was going to lead into a fight they wouldn't walk away from. He picked up his rifle, went back to cleaning it. There was nothing left to do. The courier arrived at 1447, a single fast transit pod, unmanned, burning hard from Callaway Station with no escort and no identification broadcast. It landed on Firebase Kessler's auxiliary pad and sat there hissing coolant vapor into the afternoon air. Inside was a reinforced medical case, temperature-controlled, sealed with O'Neill's biometric lock. Davis pressed his thumb to the override panel. The case opened. 5 injectors, each one the length of a forearm, thick gauge needles designed for deep intramuscular delivery. The liquid inside was colorless. It looked like nothing. Water in a tube, the kind of nothing that ends lives. Beside the injectors, a data chip. Davis plugged it into his personal terminal back in the command pit. O'Neill's face appeared, recorded, clinical. The man hadn't slept. That much was visible in the bruising under his eyes and the careful way he held his jaw. Like speaking required effort he was rationing. "General, injection protocol is straightforward. Intramuscular, upper thigh, or deltoid. Compound reaches full systemic distribution in 90 seconds. At that point, all pain signaling is suppressed. Adrenal output will triple within 3 minutes. Cortisol regulation is overridden. The body will continue performing through structural damage that would normally cause shock, unconsciousness, or death." O'Neill paused on the recording, looked directly into the camera. What follows is not endurance. It is delayed collapse. The compound does not heal. It silences. Every wound sustained accumulates without neurological feedback. The subject will not know they are dying until the cascade begins. Kidneys first, then liver, then cardiac failure. Under combat stress, terminal window is 6 to 8 hours. General, these men will not feel themselves die. That is the cost. A second pause. Longer. O'Neill looked like he wanted to add something. Then he reached forward and killed the recording. Davis removed the chip, put it in his pocket, picked up the case and walked to the barracks. The 5 were ready. Not in the way that looked like preparation, in the way that looked like men who had stopped waiting. Weapons cleaned, ammunition distributed, gear stripped to essentials. No comfort items, no personal effects, no letters tucked into pockets. Duval had organized the loadout overnight. Every man carried exactly what he needed, and nothing else. The barracks around them was full of Marines who were awake, but pretending not to watch. Nobody spoke to the 5. Nobody knew what to say. The distance had already started. Davis set the case on the table, opened it, Compound 11. 1 each. You inject before contact. Not earlier. The clock starts at injection. Everything after that is borrowed time. Use it well or waste it. That part is yours. Duval took the case, distributed the injectors without comment. Each man secured his in a thigh pouch, accessible in seconds. Hargrove held his up to the light for a moment, looking at the colorless liquid inside. Then he put it away and went back to loading shells into his shotgun. "Brannick," Davis said. Brannick stepped forward. Davis activated the tactical display. A satellite image of Satori 4 filled the screen, or what was left of it. The surface looked like a different planet. Green replaced by gray and black. Structures reduced to geometric footprints on scorched ground. Tell them what they're walking into. Brannick studied the image for 3 seconds, orienting, matching what he saw against what he remembered. Then he started talking. More words than most of them had ever heard from him at once. Central Hospital Complex is here. 6 buildings connected by covered walkways and underground service tunnels. Main surgical wing faces east. Recovery wards run north-south along this ridge. The administrative building is the tallest structure on the campus. Was 5 stories. Probably 3 now. Maybe less. His finger traced routes on the display. Steady. The hand of a marksman. Underground tunnel network connects all 6 buildings. Staff use them for supply transport and patient transfer during weather. Tunnels are reinforced. Medical grade. Designed to maintain sterile conditions during storms. They'll survive orbital bombardment better than the surface structures. If the Sethrak are using the complex as a command position, they're in the administrative building. High ground. Best sight lines. Defensive advantage. But the tunnels give us access from below. They won't expect it because they didn't build this place. They don't know what's under their feet. You walked these tunnels, Duval said. Not a question. Every day for 3 weeks during rehab. Surgical wing to recovery ward and back. Twice a day. I know the junctions. I know the access points. I know where the tunnels narrow and where they widen into supply hubs. I know the blind corners. Duval looked at the display, then at Brannick. You're on navigation. Nobody moves without your call on direction. You say left, we go left. You say stop, we stop. No questions. Brannick nodded once. Davis looked at the 5 of them, made sure they were listening. Insertion is by drop pod. Single pod, 5 occupants. Electronic countermeasures will mask your approach until atmospheric entry. After that, you're visible. The Sethrak garrison is estimated at company strength, 100 to 120 combatants. They're holding the planet as a statement, not a fortress. They don't expect a ground assault on a dead world. You're not going in to hold ground. You're going in to break their command structure. Company strength against 5, Welk said. He wasn't questioning it. He was calculating. His fingers tapped against his thigh in a steady rhythm. Distances. Charges. Blast spread. How much pressure the structures would take before they failed. Against 5 who won't stop, Davis said. That was the last thing he said to them. The drop pod hit Satori 4's atmosphere at an angle designed to look like debris. Orbital junk. Wreckage from the bombardment falling back from displaced trajectories. Re-entry fire bloomed across the heat shield, turning the viewport into a wall of orange light. Inside, the 5 sat in crash harnesses, vibration rattling their teeth, the hull temperature climbing past the point where the metal ticked and groaned. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say that the harnesses and the heat weren't already saying. Brannick watched the altimeter. 15,000 meters. 10. 5. The numbers falling like a countdown that didn't care about the men reading it. Retroburn kicked them all forward against their straps. Vertebrae compressed. Vision narrowed. The pod slammed into the surface, dug a furrow through what had been a garden terrace, shearing through topsoil and the remains of ornamental stone pathways, and stopped with a final lurch that cracked the interior lighting. Duval popped the hatch. The air that hit them was wrong. Satori 4 had been temperate, green. The briefing files showed rolling hills, engineered forests, recovery gardens designed to aid healing, patients walking sunlit paths between therapy sessions. What they stepped into was gray. Ash covered everything. The sky was the color of old smoke, particles still suspended from the bombardment weeks later, filtering the sunlight into something pale and sick. The ground crunched under their boots. Not soil, white dust and pulverized medical-grade ceramic. Hargrove was first out, shotgun up, scanning. The landscape stretched in every direction as a field of low rubble and ash drifts. Nothing stood higher than chest height within 200 meters. Beyond that, the skeletal remains of larger structures clawed upward against the gray sky. Clear immediate. The five spread out. Duval hand-signaled the formation, Hargrove on point. Stavros left with the heavy weapon slung across his chest, the barrel still cold. Welk right, his demolition pack riding high on his shoulders. Brannick center with Duval, navigating. They moved through the ruins of what had been the Eastern Rehabilitation Campus. Collapsed buildings. Walls standing at odd angles with nothing behind them like stage sets for a play about the end of something. Medical equipment fused into slag. Surgical tables melted into the floors beneath them. Brannick recognized the shapes of things. A hydrotherapy pool, now a crater filled with gray water and debris. A physical therapy ward, now a skeleton of structural beams. The path he'd walked every morning during his recovery, from his bunk to the knee rehabilitation unit, was a trench of rubble and fused glass. He didn't linger, didn't slow. He navigated. Sethrak Patrol, 200 meters, moving east along the main road. Brannick's voice was flat, quiet enough that it barely carried past Duval. He'd spotted them through a gap in a collapsed wall, 8 Sethrak. Standard patrol formation, 2x2 column with flankers, weapons at carry, not ready. Tails at mid-height, jaw clicks at resting frequency. Comfortable, confident. They owned this place, and they knew it. The ruins of humanity's healing world were their trophy, and they walked through it like victors surveying the proof. Duval looked at the patrol, looked at his 4 Marines, calculated distance, angle, cover, then reached for the injector in his thigh pouch. Now. 5 needles, 5 thighs. The injectors drove the compound deep into muscle tissue with a mechanical click that sounded like a round being chambered. Duval felt it at 40 seconds, a warmth that started in his leg and spread upward like something being poured into him. At 60 seconds, it reached his chest. His shoulder, the one that had ached since a Sethrak round grazed the joint 6 months ago, went silent. Not numb. Silent. Like a voice that had been complaining for months, suddenly stopped mid-sentence. The low-grade pain in his knees from years of drops and hard landings vanished. His lower back, which hadn't felt right since his second tour, released. At 90 seconds, everything was quiet. Not numb. Quiet. His body felt like a machine that had just had every warning light switched off, every maintenance alarm silenced. He could feel his hands, feel his weapon, feel the ground under his boots, feel the texture of the trigger guard against his index finger. But every signal that had been telling him something was wearing down. Something was wrong. Something was old and damaged. All of it went dark. The world sharpened. Colors brighter even through the gray haze, edges harder. His heart rate climbed and it felt like fuel, not stress. Like his body had been holding back, and now the governor was gone. He looked at the others. Hargrove was rolling his forearm, testing the range of motion in his wrist, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Stavros squared his shoulders, the rebuilt one moving with the same freedom as the other for the first time in months. The big man flexed his hands around the heavy weapon and settled it against his hip like it weighed nothing. Welk's nervous energy had focused into something still and precise, his eyes tracking the patrol with the fixed attention of a man measuring distances for charges. Brannick stood straighter. The knee he'd been unconsciously favoring, the one rebuilt on this very planet, was bearing full weight. He shifted his stance, and the micro-adjustment he'd been making with every step for 3 months disappeared. They looked at each other. Nobody said it felt good. Nobody mentioned the clarity, or the absence of pain, or the way the world seemed sharper. Nobody acknowledged that this was the best their bodies had felt in years, and that this feeling was killing them. "Move," Duval said. They hit the Sethric patrol from the west side, through the collapsed hydrotherapy building. Hargrove went through the gap first, shotgun firing before his second foot touched the ground. The first Sethrak took the blast in the chest and went backward off its digitigrade legs, scales splitting open like ceramic tile, throat sac bursting in a spray of dark fluid. The second Sethrak turned and Hargrove was already there, shotgun at contact distance. The discharge blew through the scaled torso and painted the rubble behind it. Stavros came through wide on the left, the heavy weapon roaring. He walked the fire across the patrol formation in a sustained line that cut the Sethrak column in half. Brass casings poured from the weapon in a bright cascade, bouncing off the ash-covered ground. 3 Sethrak caught in the stream went down in pieces. The remaining 3 reacted fast, disciplined. They dropped to cover positions behind a collapsed wall section and returned fire within 2 seconds. Plasma bolts snapped through the air, superheating the ash into glass where they struck, leaving smoking craters of fused earth. 1 bolt caught Stavros in the right side, just below the ribs. The superheated plasma punched through his armor plate, melted the ceramic insert, and seared a channel through the muscle beneath. The wound was deep, cauterized at the edges, but open in the center. Blood and fluid welled up immediately. Stavros didn't stop, didn't flinch, didn't look down. He adjusted his stance 1 inch to compensate for the impact and kept firing. His rate of fire didn't decrease, his accuracy didn't waver. He stood in the open with a hole in his side and put sustained heavy fire on the Sethrak cover position until the wall they were hiding behind disintegrated. The Sethrak who had shot him was still alive behind the rubble. It watched Stavros continue fighting. Its jaw clicks accelerated to a frequency that meant alarm. Its throat sac inflated and deflated rapidly. Its tail dropped 3 inches. The behavioral response was involuntary. Stress. Confusion. The Sethrak had shot this human. It had seen the bolt connect. It had seen the wound open. And the human had not changed. Hargrove closed the distance on the right flank. Shotgun. Shotgun. 2 more Sethrak down. The last one standing swung a bladed sidearm at him. A curved thing, single-edged, designed for the Sethrak 4-fingered grip. It caught Hargrove across the left forearm, slicing through the uniform fabric and into the muscle beneath. The cut was deep enough to expose the pale layer of fascia. Blood splattered across the ash in heavy drops. Hargrove looked at the wound, watched his own blood running down his wrist and between his fingers, then looked at the Sethrak that had cut him, then shot it in the throat from a distance of 2 feet. He kept moving, blood running freely down his arm, dripping off his fingers, pooling in the grip of his shotgun. His hold on the weapon didn't change. His speed didn't change. His breathing didn't change. Nothing changed. 8 dead. 40 seconds from first shot to last. Welk moved through the bodies, checking weapons, checking equipment. Professional, quick. He stripped a communications unit from one of the Sethrak and examined it briefly. The device was still transmitting. An open channel. He tossed it to Duval. They transmitted during contact. Garrison knows we're here. Good. Duval said. "Let them count to 5, and figure out how 8 of theirs just died in 40 seconds. He dropped the communicator on the ground and stepped on it. They pushed deeper. Brannick led them through the ruins toward the central complex. He moved by memory through a landscape that no longer matched what he remembered, but still held its bones underneath the destruction. The fundamental geometry of the place hadn't changed. Buildings were gone, but the spaces between them remained. Pathways were buried, but the terrain that shaped them was the same. A left turn, where the cafeteria had been, now a slab of collapsed roof over crushed furniture. Through the gap where the connecting walkway had fallen, steel beams twisted into shapes that looked like frozen agony. Down a slope that used to be a landscaped path, lined with flowering plants chosen specifically for their calming properties, leading to the main surgical wing. The surgical wing was a shell, walls standing, roof gone, equipment melted into unrecognizable shapes that still held the ghosts of their functions. An operating table fused to the floor, its articulated arms frozen mid-reach. Monitoring stations reduced to warped metal and shattered glass. Brannick found the tunnel access point behind what had been the supply intake. The door was buckled, but the frame held. Sethrak hadn't used this entrance. No tracks in the ash. No scorch marks on the frame. "Demo," Duval said. Welk moved forward, examined the door, placed a shaped charge on the lock mechanism with the precision of a man who understood exactly how much force was needed and refused to use more. The charge detonated with a sharp crack that echoed through the ruins. The door blew inward and clanged down a short flight of stairs. They went underground. The tunnels were intact. Reinforced walls, smooth floors designed for wheeled gurneys and supply carts. Emergency lighting dead. The ceiling fixtures shattered or drained. The structure was sound. The air was stale and carried the faint chemical smell of medical-grade sealant. They moved in darkness, weapon lights cutting white beams through the dust. "Junction ahead," Brannick said. His voice was steady, certain. "Left goes to recovery wards. Right goes to admin building. Straight continues to the west campus. There's a supply hub at the right junction. Wide room. Check corners. Admin building. That's where they'll be. 300 meters from the junction, the tunnel opens into the basement level, service area. Mechanical, electrical, water systems. Stairs up to the main floor on the north and south sides. They moved right. Through the supply hub, weapon lights sweeping the room. Empty shelves, overturned carts. A stack of sealed medical supply containers that nobody would ever open. Above them, the sounds filtered down through the reinforced ceiling. Sethrak movement, heavy footfalls. The rapid click-click-click of tactical communication. The garrison was responding to the patrol contact, reorganizing, pulling forces back toward the central complex. Standard Sethrak response: consolidate, establish numerical advantage, eliminate the threat through overwhelming force concentration. The doctrine was sound. It had worked against every enemy the Sethrak had faced. Concentrate superior numbers at the decisive point. Apply force until the threat is neutralized. It was the correct response for any normal engagement. It was exactly what Duval wanted them to do. Pull everyone into one building, one target, one place where a demo man's worth of explosives could do the most damage. Above them, in the operations center on the second floor of the administrative building, the Sethrak garrison commander received reports from the surviving patrol elements. 5 human contacts, moving on foot, equipped with small arms and at least one crew-served weapon. 1 patrol of 8 eliminated in less than a minute. 2 of the 5 humans had sustained visible combat wounds. Both continued fighting at full combat capacity. No degradation. No behavioral change. No withdrawal. The commander stood in the center of the operations room, perfectly still. The stillness of authority. but its scales had darkened across the neck and shoulders. Involuntary. Stress chromatic response. Its tail held rigidly at mid-height, locked in position by conscious effort rather than natural confidence. It recalculated. Wounded humans degrade. This was doctrine. This was foundational. Verified across 100 engagements on a dozen worlds. Wounded humans slow. They weaken. They lose accuracy. They lose aggression. They retreat to their healing places and return later. But there were no healing places anymore. The commander itself had reviewed the bombardment data for Satori 4. Total destruction. Comprehensive. And now 5 humans were on the surface of this dead healing world, and the wounded among them were not degrading, not slowing, not retreating. The numbers did not balance. The commander issued orders. Consolidate all forces at the administrative complex. Every unit. Full garrison strength. Block all surface approaches. Cover all sight lines. Establish overlapping fields of fire. Eliminate the 5 humans through concentrated firepower. The orders went out through the clicking relay chain. Units acknowledged, moved, reformed. 104 Sethrak warriors converging on a single building. It took 7 minutes. Standard Sethrak doctrinal response time for force consolidation at a prepared position. The 5 were already under them, 300 meters away and closing, 2 of them bleeding, neither slowing down. The tunnel ended at a steel fire door marked B1 in faded medical stenciling. Basement level 1, administrative building. Brannick put his hand flat against the metal and felt vibration. Movement above. A lot of it. They're directly overhead, Brannick said. Main floor. The operations center is 2nd floor, north side. 2 stairwells. North and south. South stairwell is closer to us. Narrower. Service access. The north stairwell is the main one. Wider. That's where they'll expect an approach if they're thinking about below-ground threats at all. They're not, Duval said. They pulled everything to the surface. Doors, windows, sight lines. They're thinking horizontal. We're going vertical. Duval looked at his 4. Stavros with the hole in his side still seeping through the edges of the cauterized wound. Hargrove with blood dried black on his forearm and hand, his shotgun grip stained dark. Welk already studying the doorframe, thinking about what was behind it. Brannick still and patient, eyes tracking something only he could see in the layout of his memory. Welk, how much demo do you have left? Welk ran the inventory without checking his pack. He knew by weight. 2 directional charges, 1 breaching charge, 4 blocks of composition explosive, enough detonator cord for maybe 15 meters, 2 initiators. Can you drop the operations center floor? Welk's eyes moved, looking at the building in his head. The structural engineering of a 5-story administrative building and a medical campus, load-bearing walls, column spacing, floor slab construction. Medical grade meant overbuilt, reinforced for equipment loads, heavy imaging machines, surgical robotics. Dense stuff. Not the whole floor, but if I can get charges on 2 of the primary support columns on the 1st floor, directly below the ops center, I can collapse a section. Maybe 30% of the 2nd floor drops into the 1st. Anyone standing in that section goes with it, and it opens the floor for direct fire from below. Do it. Brannick, south stairwell. Get us to the 1st floor. Stavros, you hold the stairwell base. Anything comes down, it doesn't get past you. Hargrove, you're with me, clearing rooms on the 1st floor while Welk sets charges. No questions. No confirmation needed. Duval gave orders the way he always had. Once and quiet. Brannick opened the fire door. Beyond it, the basement level stretched in both directions. Emergency lighting was dead here too, but their weapon lights caught the shapes of mechanical systems. Water treatment, electrical distribution panels, climate control units, the infrastructure that had kept a hospital running. All dark, all silent. The machines that had maintained life support for 22,000 recovering patients stood in rows, like monuments to something that no longer existed. They moved through the basement in formation, Brannick leading. The south stairwell access was 80 meters east, through a maintenance corridor lined with pipe runs and cable trays. Their boots echoed on the concrete floor. Above them, the Sethrak footfalls were constant, heavy, rhythmic. The sound of a garrison in defensive positions, shifting weight, adjusting fields of fire, preparing for an attack from outside that was already inside. Brannick found the south stairwell door, unmarked except for a small emergency exit placard. He tested the handle. Unlocked. The door opened onto a narrow concrete staircase rising upward in tight switchbacks. Service access, built for maintenance staff, barely wide enough for 2 men abreast. Duval hand-signaled. Stavros took position at the base of the stairs. The big man settled his heavy weapon on the lowest step, angled upward, creating a kill channel that nothing could descend through alive. His wound had stopped bleeding visibly, but the armor plate on his right side was warped and dark with dried fluid. He didn't acknowledge it. He just set up his weapon and waited. Duval, Hargrove, Welk, and Brannick went up. The first floor was chaos held in place by discipline. They emerged from the stairwell into a service corridor that ran behind the main lobby. Through the walls, they could hear Sethrak communication. Jaw clicks at combat frequency. Rapid. Overlapping. Officers directing positioning. The garrison had consolidated exactly as doctrine demanded. All doors and windows covered. Every approach lane blocked. Fields of fire mapped and assigned. None of them were watching the service corridor. Duval went left. Hargrove with him. Welk went right with Brannick covering. The corridor branched into a series of utility rooms and office spaces that lined the interior of the building. Welk moved through them with purpose, counting paces, mapping the position of the structural columns through the walls. He found the first one, a reinforced concrete column, 60 centimeters square, running from foundation to roof, load-bearing, primary structure. Welk placed his hand on it and felt the weight of the building pressing down through it. He could almost hear it. The compression, the stress, the physics of a structure standing because this column and others like it said it could. He rigged the first charge in 40 seconds. Directional. Shaped to cut the column at its base and at 2 meters, removing a section and letting gravity do the rest. Detonator cord looped. Initiator set. He moved to find the second column. In the corridor, Duval and Hargrove hit the first Sethrak they'd encountered inside the building. 2 sentries posted at an interior junction, facing outward toward the main entrance. They never turned around. Hargrove's shotgun took the first one in the back of the skull. Duval put 3 rounds into the second before it completed its turn. The bodies dropped. Jaw clicks from adjacent rooms increased in frequency. "They heard that," Hargrove said. "Let them come to us." 3 Sethrak came through a doorway to the left, fast, weapons up, trained. The first one fired and the plasma bolt scorched the wall above Duval's head, close enough to feel the heat on his scalp. Hargrove stepped into the doorway and fired twice. 2 Sethrak down. The third lunged with a bladed weapon extended. It caught Duval across the left arm, the blade skating off the armor plate but digging into the gap at the elbow joint. Blood welled up. Duval shot the Sethrak through the eye with his sidearm and kept moving. Welk found the second column. Deeper inside the building, directly below where the operations center should be. He could hear the garrison commander above. The clicks were different. Command frequency. Deliberate. The sound of an officer issuing orders from a position of authority. He placed the second charge, hand steady. No wasted movement. Welk had always thought in structures, how they were built, how they came apart. This one would come apart in approximately 4 seconds after initiation. The two columns would fail simultaneously. The section of floor above would lose support across a 6-meter span. The concrete slab, the equipment, the Sethrak standing on it, all of it would drop 3 meters into the first floor in a cascade of rubble and dust and confusion. He connected the detonator cord, ran it back to the first charge, tied both into a single initiator. "Set," he said over the squad channel. "Everyone clear of the blast zone," Duval ordered. "Welk, get clear and blow it." "Negative," Welk said. Not arguing, just stating fact. Blast fills the corridor. 15 meters isn't enough. A beat. Duval understood immediately. There was no adjustment to make, no better geometry to find. "Make it count," Duval said. Duval pulled back, Hargrove with him. Brannick was already at the junction, covering. They stacked behind the corner and waited. Welk stayed at the initiator point. He'd already run the numbers when he set the charges. 2 columns, load transfer, collapse radius, overpressure in a confined space. This was the only way it worked. He checked the line once. Clean, tight. Fire in the hole. He pressed the initiator. The world split open. Both columns failed at once. The sound was not an explosion. It was the sound of a building breaking its own spine. Concrete cracking. Steel reinforcement snapping like tendons. The floor above sagging, then falling, then crashing down in a waterfall of rubble and dust and bodies. Sethrak, caught in the collapse, disappeared into the debris. The operations center tore open from below. Equipment, furniture, display screens, communication arrays, all of it tumbled through the gap and shattered on the first floor. The garrison commander fell with it. 2 stories, into the rubble of its own command post. Its body hit the debris pile, and its tail thrashed once, twice, then went still. Scales darkening to black across the entire body. The chromatic stress response completing its final cycle. The overpressure wave ripped through the corridor and hit Welk like a wall made of sound. It threw him backward, slammed him against the far wall. His ribs broke. Several of them. His left arm shattered at the forearm where the bone met the blast force and lost. Shrapnel from the concrete peppered his chest and face. He slid down the wall and sat on the floor of the corridor in the settling dust. Compound 11 kept the pain away. He felt the impacts, felt the breaking. But it was information, not agony. Data without consequence. He looked down at his chest, saw the shrapnel embedded in his armor and in the skin beneath, saw the angle of his left forearm, and understood it was broken in at least 2 places. Saw blood pooling around him from sources he couldn't identify. He tried to stand. His legs worked. His right arm worked. But the internal damage was too comprehensive. Welk sat back against the wall, looked toward the junction where the others were stacked. Dust still filling the air. The sound of the collapse still echoing through the building. Above, through the hole he'd made, he could hear Sethrak screaming in frequencies humans weren't meant to process. Confusion. Panic. Their command structure gone in 4 seconds. He'd done what the demo man does. He'd brought the structure down. Duval found him 30 seconds later. Welk was still sitting against the wall. His eyes were open. His right hand was resting on his demo pack, fingers curled loosely around the strap out of habit. He'd bled out from internal injuries that Compound 11 had kept him from feeling. He looked like a man who had sat down to rest and simply decided not to get up. Duval looked at him for 2 seconds. He closed Welk's eyes, then turned to the others. "Push through. Now, while they're broken." They went through the gap in the collapsed floor and into the remains of the operations center. The second floor was a ruin of dust and debris, and Sethrak bodies half buried in rubble. The survivors were disorganized. The command structure had died with the garrison commander. Individual Sethrak fought from positions of cover, but there was no coordination. No doctrine. just soldiers following the last order they'd received with no one to issue the next one. Hargrove cleared rooms with the shotgun the way he'd been doing since the first patrol. Door, weapon, fire, move. His forearm wound had reopened from the blast concussion, blood flowing freely again, and he'd taken a new hit during the push through the debris. A plasma graze across the top of his left shoulder that burned through armor and uniform and skin and exposed the muscle beneath. He fought through it the way he'd fought through everything, without acknowledgement. They cleared the second floor in 6 minutes. 23. Sethrak killed. The remainder fell back to the upper floors, retreating upward, losing ground floor by floor, because their doctrine told them to consolidate, and there was nothing left to consolidate around. On the third-floor landing, Hargrove stopped. Not because of an enemy, not because of a tactical decision. His body stopped. O'Neill's prediction was precise. Kidneys first. Hargrove felt something change in his lower back. Not pain, something more fundamental. A system shutting off, like a generator running out of fuel and going quiet without warning. He took 2 more steps. His legs felt heavy. Not tired. Heavy, like his blood was thickening. Because it was. Without kidney function, toxins were building in his bloodstream faster than his liver could compensate. And the liver was next. Hargrove leaned against the stairwell wall. His shotgun was still in his hands. His grip was still firm. Brannick was ahead, clearing the next corridor. Duval was behind, covering the rear. Neither of them saw Hargrove stop, because Hargrove didn't make a sound. He thought about his brother. Not a flashback. Just the fact of him. Samuel Hargrove, medic. Satori 4, dead in the bombardment without ever knowing it was coming. Hargrove pushed off the wall, took 4 more steps, raised the shotgun. A Sethrak appeared at the end of the corridor, emerging from a doorway with its weapon tracking toward Brannick's back. Hargrove fired. The Sethrak went down. Hargrove cycled the action. His hands were slower now. The toxin buildup was starting to hit his motor control. He could feel his fingers getting thick and clumsy. He fired again at a second Sethrak, hit it in the chest. It fell. Then Hargrove's legs gave out. Not a fall, just a quiet cessation of function. He went to one knee, then the other. The shotgun rested across his thighs. His eyes were still open, still tracking the corridor ahead, still watching for threats. Duval reached him, knelt beside him. Hargrove's mouth moved. No sound came out. His vocal cords were failing, but Duval read his lips. 2 words. Not his brother's name, not a farewell. How many? All of them, Duval said. We got all of them. Hargrove's eyes stayed open for another 3 seconds. Then they didn't. He died on Satori 4, the same planet where Samuel Hargrove had died, healing the soldiers Fen Hargrove now avenged. Duval stood, looked at Brannick. 2 men, the last of the 5. Below them, Stavros was still holding the stairwell base, 3 survivors out of 5, and the clock was running on all of them. They cleared the remaining floors in 11 minutes. The Sethrak resistance fragmented completely. Individual soldiers fighting alone, without orders, without coordination, without the doctrinal framework that gave their actions meaning. They fought well. They fought bravely. They died anyway, because 3 humans who should have been dead kept coming through every door and around every corner, with weapons up, and no hesitation, and no pain, and no intention of stopping, for any reason at all. The last Sethrak on Satori 4 died on the 5th floor, in a corner of what had been a conference room overlooking the ruins of the healing world it had helped destroy. Brannick dropped it with a single round from 60 meters through 2 doorways, clean, patient, The way he always worked. Silence. Not the silence after a battle. The silence after something fundamental has changed, and the world hasn't caught up yet. Duval keyed his comm. Firebase Kessler. Satori 4 is clear. Garrison eliminated. 2 KIA. 3 survivors. We need medical evac. Priority immediate. Davis's voice came back. Already moving. Already prepared. He'd been listening to the entire engagement through the squad channel, following the fight from Firebase Kessler the way a general does when he's sent men where he can't follow. Evac is already airborne. 30 minutes. Dr. O'Neill is on board. Copy. 30 minutes. Duval looked at Brannick. Get Stavros up here. Brannick went down and came back with Stavros. The big man climbed the stairs slowly. Not because of pain, because his body was beginning to fail in ways that had nothing to do with the wound in his side. His movements were deliberate, mechanical, a machine running on the last of its fuel. The three of them stood on the top floor of the administrative building and looked out through the shattered windows at the surface of Satori 4. Gray and ruined, ash and rubble stretching to the horizon. The remains of a world built entirely for healing, destroyed by an enemy that thought removing the ability to heal would end the war. 26 minutes until evac. O'Neill had not been idle. From the moment he sent the 5 injectors to General Davis, he had been working. At Callaway Station first, then on the transport when Davis scrambled the evac. His laboratory was a fold-out surgical station in the cargo bay of a medical transport. Cramped, insufficient. It didn't matter. The work was not about space. It was about the problem. Compound 11 was a cascade weapon. It silenced pain and overrode biological limiters, and the cost was systemic organ failure. But failure was a process, not an instant. It happened in sequence. Each stage took time. Each stage had a window between onset and irreversibility. O'Neill had designed the compound. He understood its architecture the way Welk had understood buildings. He knew how it came apart because he knew how it was built. And in the hours since the 5 had injected, he had been constructing the intervention protocol, organ by organ, system by system, a chemical framework to slow the cascade, stabilize each system at the threshold of failure, and hold the body in suspension while he repaired the damage manually. Induced coma was the key. Drop the metabolic rate, reduce the stress response, take the body out of the combat state that was accelerating the cascade. In coma, the terminal window extended from hours to days. Days was enough. Days was a lifetime in surgical terms. He'd tested the protocol on simulation models during the flight, refined the dosing, adjusted the stabilization compounds, run the numbers until they balanced, then run them again. The transport landed on Satori 4, 28 minutes after Duval's call. O'Neill was out of the cargo bay before the engines finished cycling down. 2 field medics followed with stretchers and equipment cases. He found them on the top floor. 3 men, standing, barely. Duval was still standing, but only just. His wounded arm hung loose, his skin pale, a gray tone creeping in. Stavros was sitting on the floor, with his back against a support column, the heavy weapon across his lap, his breathing shallow and too regular. Mechanical breathing, the body maintaining function through chemical override rather than natural rhythm. Brannick was still standing, but his eyes had the glassy quality of a man whose systems were shutting down behind a mask of chemical silence. O'Neill didn't greet them, didn't ask how they felt. He knew how they felt. They felt nothing. That was the problem. Duval, you first. Lie down. Duval looked at him. No argument. No questions. He lowered himself to the floor. O'Neill was already preparing the coma induction, a cocktail of sedatives and metabolic suppressors calibrated to work with Compound 11's remaining chemical presence rather than against it. The needle went in. Duval's eyes closed in 6 seconds. His breathing deepened. His heart rate dropped. The cascade, which had been building momentum toward terminal failure, slowed, not stopped. Slowed. O'Neill watched the portable monitor. Kidney function at 31% and declining, but the rate of decline had cut in half. Liver holding at 68%. Cardiac rhythm irregular, but sustainable. Enough. For now, enough. Stavros, you're next. Stavros looked up at him, the big man who had carried the crew-served weapon through the entire assault with a plasma wound in his side and never mentioned it. He set the weapon aside carefully, the way a man puts down something he respects, and lay back on the floor. O'Neill induced coma, monitored, stabilized. Stavros's trauma was worse. The wound in his side had been bleeding internally for hours, and Compound 11 had masked every symptom. But the cascade was earlier stage. The kidneys were damaged, but not failed. The liver was stressed, but functional. Enough to work with. Brannick. Brannick was the last. He was still standing, still watching the windows, still covering the approach, even though the enemy was gone. The marksman's discipline running on chemical fuel and habit. O'Neill walked to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "It's done, Corporal. Lie down." Brannick looked at O'Neill, then at the ruins of Satori 4 beyond the window, the planet that had healed his knee, the tunnels he'd walked during recovery, the world that had put him back together so he could come back and fight on its corpse. He lay down. O'Neill induced coma. The last of the 3 went under. O'Neill stood in the shattered operations center of the administrative building, surrounded by Sethrak bodies and concrete dust and the quiet breathing of 3 men in chemical sleep. He checked each monitor, then checked them again, then a 3rd time. Duval. Cascade arrested. Organ function declining but within recoverable parameters. Prognosis. Survival with extended surgical intervention. Stavros. Cascade slowed. Internal hemorrhage contained, but still critical. Organ function marginal but stabilizable. Prognosis. Survival with aggressive treatment. Brannick. Cascade early stage. Minimal organ compromise. Healthiest of the 3. Prognosis. Full recovery. O'Neill looked at the monitors. 3 green trends on 3 screens. Not healthy. Not safe. But alive. Alive in a way that would stay alive because he understood what he had built, and he understood how to unbuild it. Not perfectly. Not safely. But enough. He allowed himself 1 breath. A long, slow exhale that carried something he hadn't permitted himself to feel since he'd handed Davis the case with 5 injectors. Not relief. Not yet. The road back for these 3 would be long and brutal and uncertain in the details, but the direction was right. The numbers pointed toward living. 1 breath. Then he went back to work. Davis received the report 14 hours later. Satori 4 secured. Sethrak garrison eliminated. 104 enemy KIA. 2 Marines killed in action. PFC Tomasz Welk and Corporal Fen Hargrove. 3 Marines in induced coma, undergoing treatment. Sergeant Mace Duval. Lance Corporal Rick Stavros. Corporal Nix Brannick. He read the report twice, then closed the terminal. Around Firebase Kessler, the war continued. Lines held or broke. Marines went down, and there was still no healing world to send them to. Satori 4 would be rebuilt. Eventually. Because humanity built things and rebuilt them when they were destroyed. But the doctrine had changed. Davis looked at the tactical display. Red markers across a dozen sectors. Sethrak commanders making calculations based on a simple truth. Wounded humans stopped fighting. The Sethrak didn't know yet that wounded humans no longer broke.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.